I would be thinking, God, you've got to be joking. Are you kidding me? I'm trying to be part of the solution here. And at that point, God could have said, hey, listen, Paul, I know it really, I know it's tough. I know it is really rank what you're going through at the moment. But Paul, and God could have rolled out a celestial PowerPoint, and Jacob, help me here. He could have said, Paul, I want you to know, look, Paul, avert your eyes to the screen, Paul. Well, let me give you that's what Malta looks like now in 2010, but it looked radically different back then. Thank you. All right, Jacob, next slide. God could have said to Paul, he could have said, hang in there. I know this is tough, but Paul, do you know, because you're here, Malta is going to be the first nation in all of Europe to get what my son, Jesus Christ, was all about. Malta is going to be the first nation in all of Europe to get it. It will even surpass Jerusalem. Jerusalem didn't get it like Malta got it. You know that Paul, in the census, next slide, thanks Jacob, in the census taken in the early 2000s, 97.2% of the population of Malta will tick the box that says Christianity is their faith. Paul, it's going to be worth it. I know you're standing there with a snake stuck on your hand, and you're cold and you're tired and you're hungry and you're sick of this. But Paul, it's all going to amount to something. Paul, I want you to even know, Jacob, help me here, that they're going to name a street after you. Everybody's going to want to live on that street, Paul. But you know, God didn't. And God often won't with us either. And he did it with Paul because he knew that when Paul accepted Jesus into his heart, when Paul had that transformation of Christ in his life, God had put a power within him that exceeded whatever circumstances he would run into. Bruce Barton once said this, nothing splendid has ever been achieved except by those who believe that something inside of them is greater than their circumstances. Now, I don't know whether he was a Christian or not, but he sums up what it is to have Christ in us. You see, Gordon and myself, and Rain and your other leaders, we're committed to telling you the whole truth. And as much as I would like to stand up here and just give you the good news, I got to also give you the bad news. We got a great destiny in God. Here's the bad news. We got a phenomenal destiny in God. But there's a lot of obstacles on the road to achieving that destiny. There's a lot of debris on the road. There's a lot of brokenness on the road. There's a lot of potholes and speed bumps on that road. I'm sorry. No, I'm not apologizing. I'm telling you, the best thing I can do is to tell you the truth. And the truth is that God does have a phenomenal future for you, but standing between you now and that future is immense challenges. Sorry to break the news to you, but here's the good news. The power that is within you is greater than any obstacle you will face. And I'm here to remind you of that. I know that there will be times in your life where you're standing there, figuratively speaking, with a snake hanging from your hand. Thinking, God, I don't deserve this. This makes no sense. Why am I here? Why am I experiencing this? And I believe that God allowed Paul to experience this so that he might demonstrate to us the best thing to do. Because it says here, getting old. When the islanders saw the snake dangling from his hand, they said to each other, this man must be a murderer. Though he escaped from the sea, justice has not allowed him to live. So they're pontificating upon his dilemma. But Paul shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no ill effects. You know nobody ever dies from a snake bite. you are going, "Oh, Wes, have you forgotten what country you cometh from?" Australia, we have the deadliest snakes in all the world, and we have a lot of them. And I'm telling you, nobody's ever died of a snake bite. Because, when you think of it, Steve, a snake bite is just simply two little, less than hypodermic needle prongs that just whoosh, in and tag you, come back out, a little couple of dots of blood maybe. But I'm telling you, in a couple of days, those dots will disappear, that skin will be all covered over. You won't even be able to tell that there was 2 puncture wounds there. It's not the bite that kills you, it's the venom. It's the poison. And if there's one thing that Apostle Paul demonstrated for us, it's this. There'll be times in our life when unfortunate things bite us. Gordon and I were talking just before church. Some unfortunate things that have happened in our own families. No fault of ours. Just a part of being in this crazy, jacked up world. We've been bitten. But here's the thing. We can be bitten. And God doesn't promise us that we won't be bitten. But God promises us that we don't need to partner with anything poisonous. And Paul shook that which had bitten him into the fire. And that's symbolic because when you look at Hebrews chapter 12, verse 29, it says of God, "For God is a consuming fire." That means that whatever you shake off into God, whatever has bitten you, whether it be a retrenchment, whether it be a divorce, whether it be alcohol, drugs, and brokenness, depression, massive discouragement, whatever has bitten you, sometimes our fault, sometimes not our fault. But ultimately, God doesn't want us to be infected by the poison that comes along with that bite. You see, sometimes, we get bitten by something, maybe, let's say, for example, somebody gets retrenched. And they find it really hard to get another job. And they get bitten by this thing, but then the poison gets in. You're unemployable. You're too old. You haven't got the skills of what's needed in the marketplace at the moment. And after a while, you kind of just relabel yourself. Because you've not only been bitten, but you haven't shaken that thing off and said, "No, I'm a child of the living God. And He sent Jesus to rescue me, and He didn't do that for no apparent reason." You see what happens, and what was happening to me that night when Helen, rejected my desire to be a blessing to her. I'd been bitten, but I was letting the poison get in. If that happens again, it's just not worth it. It saddens me to see so many people who've been bitten, and instead of shaking that thing off, and I'm not saying that it's easy, but I'm saying that it's possible. And I'm saying that when you do keep shaking that off into the all-consuming fire of God, He can deliver us from the toxin that comes along with that. But I've seen so many who just get bitten, and then they just drag it along. And they come up and they say, "Hi, my name is Wes. I'm an alcoholic. My name is Jane, and I've been divorced twice. My name's Nick, and I'm retrenched, and I've been unemployed for a long time." And what happens is you start to define yourself by what's bitten you. And you start dragging those snakes. And the weight of those snakes is so much that God has an immense blessing and destiny for you. But it's so slow getting there because you're dragging these things. And I'm here just to remind you, we all get bit. And we all know what it is to feel that sense of brokenness when we get bit. God has said, Wes, would you just remind the people that I'm the solution? Just shake it off. Shake it off. I will deal with it. The power of my forgiveness, the power of confession can release you. Oh, you'll still get the bites, but you don't have to partner with the poison. Come on, help me here. Some time ago, it was actually pretty recent, my wife and I were speaking at a marriage retreat. And over the course of the weekend marriage retreat, a guy called Jonathan comes up to me and says, Wes, it's so good to see you again. And I said, well, it's good to see you, Jonathan, but I don't remember meeting you the first time. I refreshed my memory. And he says, I'll never forget it. He says, let me tell you what happened. 5 years ago, my wife and I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, and she was born 2 months premature. And Wes, when a child is born that much premature, their respiratory system isn't quite developed, and our little girl would struggle to breathe sometimes, and she would go have seizures, and the breathing would get really shallow, and we'd bundle her up and we'd rush her to the hospital, and they'd get her breathing right again, and then we'd bring her home. And said, Wes, this one night, our little girl went into a seizure that was so strong that she had stopped breathing completely. And Jonathan, he's a big, burly guy, strong, muscular, and he says, my little girl could fit into my hand. And she was turning blue, and I've got my 2 fingers, I'm pressing them down into her chest, trying to keep her heart going as we're driving to the hospital, and not knowing whether this was going to be the night in which we would lose our little girl. And we handed her over and there we sat in the waiting room, alone, terrified, wondering where God fit into all this. He said, Wes, that was about 4 years ago, and it happened about 3 o'clock in the morning. And you walked through the waiting room, and you stopped, and you talked to us. And we told you why we were there, and you prayed with us. You put your hands on our shoulders, and you just prayed. And for the first moments in so long, we felt that God had not forgotten. And then you left. And Wes, I'm so glad to see you 4 years later. I've been dying to tell you, something happened on that night. I don't completely understand it, but something happened, because from that night on, our little girl has never suffered another seizure, and she's perfectly healthy and perfectly developed. And I'm thinking, that was the night that I thought I was getting up to help Helen. That was the night that I was so dejected because I went up to help Helen and Helen didn't want my help. I got bitten by a rejection. Instead of shaking that thing off into the all-consuming fire of God and letting Him deal with it, I let it curl up on the seat next to me. I drove home, dragged it into the house with me, let it destroy my day with its toxins.